There we are. All right. Thank you, folks, for joining us for our second Honors College Colloquium of the spring semester. I am very pleased to have two speakers today, Dr. Christine Yells and Dr. David Yells. Dr. Christine Yells is Associate Professor of Social Work here at A&M-Texarkana, and Dr. David Yells is Professor of Psychology. And today they're going to be talking to us on social media and trauma. So I will turn it over to them, and we should have some time for questions at the end. If you want to grab some snacks and coffee and such, feel free to do so. So, Dr. Yells, Dr. Yells, take it. Yeah. Yes. I was like,
It isn't often that I get to present with the man of my dreams, so I am jumping at this opportunity. Okay, so I just have to move this whole thing in.
oh, you can hire them.
Okay, yay.
Okay.
Thank you. Learned something new today.
Yeah, I've never known how to do that.
Didn't either. Indeed. Okay, so talk about social media and trauma. You need to understand the difference between stress, crisis, and trauma so that we can kind of make sense out of it. So first of all, stress is just mental strain for what's happening in your life. Typically, it's day-to-day stuff that lasts longer. It's not a specific event. That would be crisis. Crisis is a specific event or set of events that cause, that cause trouble or even danger. So that would be crisis, but trauma is what happens after that passes. It's the reaction, how you respond to that crisis or that trauma. Thanks.
Ready?
Yep. Okay, so I'm just curious, what social media platforms do you use in here? Any of those? But I'm just curious, how many accounts, how many social media accounts do you have?
How many have more than 3?
Okay.
Okay. How many have more than 5?
Yep. Okay, so not surprisingly, a lot of people have multiple accounts in social media. So we call it SMU, not Southern Methodist University, but social media use. So just kind of think about this from your own personal usage patterns. So how much time do you spend on these platforms? How do you access it? On your smartphone, on your computer, on your tablet? And does it get in the way of other things that you're doing? Is it in the way of work? Is it in the way of family time that you have, or maybe some fun activity that you're engaged in? And how easy is it for you to close it out? Just say, okay, done for the day.
Let me just ask, how many of you purposely try and take a specific break? Say, okay, no, you wake up and say, no social media today. Some people try that and take a little vacation day. Okay. And I joked at the start about, this having the room until 5 o'clock, but I just did a search this morning in the National Library of Medicine for article for public studies on risks of social media use. And there were 1,700 published just last year. So this is a big area of ongoing research. So some of what we will present, it goes back a little ways, and some of it's more recent. But you can see this joke about the adverse effects of social media use, which are becoming more and more well documented. We're hearing more and more about that. This is just stuff that's come out in the last few days, or the last year rather. Problematic use of smartphones and social media and sleep quality of high school students in Mexico City. social media, smartphone use and self-harm in young people, strong relationship between social media use and self-harm. If you're not aware, there's social media platforms that tell people how to do self-harm and encourage it as a means of coping. Strong relationship between media use and depressive symptoms. In particular, it seems to affect gender diverse use. It was a pretty substantial study. And then the last one, smartphone addiction and depression among health science students during COVID-19. I chose that one to highlight just because of the huge amount of research that's coming out of the post-COVID landscape. And we kind of now can go look back to what were things like before COVID, what happened during COVID. So you'll see studies saying, are we back to pre-COVID levels of depression, pre-COVID levels of anxiety? And we haven't got there yet. COVID was a big hit, but in this case, it looked at smartphone addiction and depression increasing during COVID as people lost other outlets for socializing and turned more and more to social media on their devices. Some of the experiences that you may have had from adverse experiences that are becoming more and more common, being cyberbullied, someone sticking a photo up that's maybe not flattering or maybe showed you someplace you weren't supposed to be, posting something about you without your consent, found out something about somebody maybe you're not too happy to. I mean, people put stuff on social media that, you know, may not be something you want to learn about them. Anybody follow political discussions? Anybody spend a lot of time arguing with strangers on social media who post political things that maybe you disagree with? And I know some of us maybe are guilty of oversharing. I mean, I'm sure you've all seen stuff on. I'm old time. I just pretty much use Facebook is about all I've got. But you know, seeing someone post something and say, I can't imagine that person would sit in a room and tell me this. You know, it's pretty intimate, pretty private, and they just disseminated it to thousands and thousands of people. So, some things that are common experiences in the social media world. Okay, and this is just we're basing this on a book chapter we published a year ago on trauma impacts. We were asked to specifically focus on social media. And so we'll talk a little bit about, you know, social media use, who and what, and then kind of break it down to, there are some good uses of social media, right? There are some benefits of using social media, but there's also detriments and risks. And then we'll finish up with some possible recommendations for moving forward. Okay, so what is social media? Go back 5 years, 6 years, about 3.5 billion social media users. So at that point, that's a little more than half, or about half the planet. Now we're well over half the planet, 2020 up to 4.6 billion. And looking ahead to now, the projection was, and the data's not in yet, but it was projected to have yet another billion. So about 2/3 of the population now using social media. The primary means of access are smartphones. That seems to be the most widely available, most widely used, most commonly used instrument for getting onto social media. 87% of Americans own a smartphone. It's almost hard to buy a phone that's not a smartphone. 96% of adults have smartphones, so that's pretty high ownership. Almost 100% of teens report being on the internet daily, and 90% of teens use social media. They report almost constantly that and you've seen these people, right? They're all over the place. They're facing their phone all the time. I'm interested to see if somebody publishes something on neck and shoulder and back problems and people being stooped over all the time, looking at their devices.
Oh, I don't know what I did here. I have no idea what I did.
On the screen itself, it might bring it back to being able to advance.
Okay.
for a moment, I was considering doing the whole presentation just in cartoons. Because they can do a search on social media images, it's just, everybody's got a cartoon, memes on Facebook. This one I thought was good, you know, someone reading about their social media addiction, little irony there. And then this is just a break, we listed all the platforms there. You see, YouTube still is the most popular, for adults at least. I don't, do we have a separate thing for kids? Okay, yeah. So adults like me, old time, YouTube, it's a big step for me when I got YouTube. Facebook, same thing. I've never used any of the other ones. And you can see, relatively speaking, the percentage. Now, there's also niche social media that tends to be, you know, extremist stuff that's not reported here, that may be some of the most dangerous stuff out there in terms of misinformation and you know, causing real damage. These are considered the mainstream platforms. And then teens, see TikTok way up there. So I mentioned somebody that to a student in one of my classes, I was gonna post something on Facebook and said, get with it, Grandpa, none of us look at Facebook anymore. So you see it's down to 32% among teens. And again, you see distribution of different platforms and what percent uses it daily. And, you know, over 10% in most cases report almost constant use. So these are individuals who are really tied to the social media landscape.
And just as an aside, YouTube is favored by teenage boys, whereas TikTok is favored by teenage girls in terms of their usage.
This is now, and this data is a little harder to come by. I just found this yesterday, a study out of Johns Hopkins that just came out. About 40% of children between 8 and 12 report social media use. I mean, I was making mud pies when I was 8 and 9 years old. And about 2/3 of 11, 12-year-olds have 3 to 4 social media accounts. So, you know, people, this is getting to younger and younger populations. Right. We don't cover this, but states are now moving. I think Utah is one of the states where they are instituting parental consent kinds of things for access to social media for their children. So the government's stepping in cases, which again, people usually aren't happy about that. But, you know, there is certainly an issue of these younger individuals having access to these platforms. Oh, that's what you put this one in a good spot. Is that Mark Zuckerberg? Okay, so some of the beneficial uses, and I'm just going to run through these. There's quite a bit out there. This is another COVID-19 study. People who use limited self-disclosure, so they're not completely opening up themselves on social media. They showed a reduction in perceived stress during COVID. This is people who have lost a loved one report that they can find good support through social media. Dissemination of information if you're dealing with maybe someone who died of a fatal disease or died of a certain kind of accident or something. It's nice to know there are other people out there. And sometimes simply the ability to share memories. People like to post memorial stuff about someone they lost, and it kind of feels good to be able to do tributes like that. And again, things like sexual trauma, which often people it's difficult to get someone to open up about sexual trauma. You can find support groups in social media maybe where you can have those kinds of conversation in a safe environment with someone who's maybe been through the same kind of trauma as you. Post-natural disaster support. This is becoming big. We're experiencing more and more natural disasters, fires, floods, hurricanes, things like that. And communities are able to pull together on social media. You can convey information about where resources are, convey information about, you know, where it's safe, where it's not safe, and things like that. So that can be a very useful way of getting the word out. A recent study on preventing and controlling HIV/AIDS, especially in developing countries, where there's still a high death rate. Reduced sense of loneliness in the elderly. This was another COVID-19 study where this was particularly important during COVID as people became more and more isolated. The elderly were able to reach out and stay in contact with people. Social media and general internet use contributing to reduced psychological distress. This was a sample of college students. And it was found to be just not as effective as in-person contact, but it did have a positive effect on psychological distress. This was an interesting one I found today. A lot of people don't respond to antidepressants, and a lot of people have bad reactions to antidepressants. Yet it's kind of the go-to medical choice for most healthcare providers. If you go in, you're diagnosed with depression, it's gonna be hard to walk out of there without a prescription. I mean, that's the mindset of the psychiatric community by and large. And individuals who want to go off antidepressants often get pushback from their prescribers. So this study found that those individuals found some support among other de-prescribed people to talk about their experience and find perhaps ways to deal with their depression that don't involve taking a pill that a lot of people have trouble with. Routine use can be associated with social well-being and positive mental health. But if you have too much emotional connection to social media, that's an adverse thing. So this kind of, there's kind of a boundary issue where if you go up to a point, you can get their benefits, but if you go beyond that and kind of get hooked or get too emotionally connected to social media, then you will experience negative mental health outcomes. 80% of neurosurgeons reported using social media as a way of supporting their professional growth in terms of connecting with other people in practice, connecting with people with various problems who needed surgery, right? Typically, you think of a neurosurgeon publishing in a medical journal. Well, how many patients go and read a medical journal to find out about treatment for a lower back problem, as opposed to maybe something on social media that comes from a clinic and a neurosurgeon saying, if you've got these symptoms, we can help you. This is another one, just generally looking at accessing expert health information, right? Now, this may be news. Not everything you read on Facebook is true. So looking at reliable sources, and you can find useful information, mental health resources, places for emotional support, connection with peers, and maintaining relationships. Again, the depression comes up in a lot of this research, the relationship between depression and social media use. Sometimes social media use can be good, other times it can be damaging. Okay. I'm gonna sit.
Okay. All right. So because I'm a clinician, I'm the therapeutic side of what happens with people with social media. So I drew the straw to cover the business. First of all, there are people that specifically use social media to kind of garner support for some real extremist or hate related groups. And that's how they find each other, through social media. College students who report having been bullied have said that these are how they're being attacked. So it's about body image. So what their physical features look like, they've been verbally abused, they've been threatened, or they've missed out. They've been intentionally excluded by people. Or somebody posts a secret of theirs on social media, which is really, really embarrassing. Childhood trauma often results in somebody becoming a cyberbully. They do it in real time, in real life, but now there's a new avenue, especially because you can say worse things, you can do worse things. It's in the comfort of your own home while you're doing it. Social media use can also predict secondary trauma. What secondary trauma is when you read a lot of stuff, how many of us are getting secondary trauma from the news? When you just, when you read stuff and over and over. When 9/11 happened, kids in therapy parents didn't realize the impact it had on them, having the news on and continuous cycles to keep up to date. And they had kids in the playrooms and play therapy that were doing airplane crashes and smashing into buildings. So, kids are recognizing this and it comes out. So that is secondary trauma. Okay, so now we shifted to problematic social media use. This is a little bit different because there's a sweet spot. Is it problematic or is it not? Everybody's going to be a little bit different. So there is a significant relationship between problematic social media use and smartphone addiction. That should be no surprise to anybody. If you're on your phone a lot and you have 3 or 4 accounts on social media, it shouldn't be a surprise if there's some addiction there. We were not allowed to say that in the chapter that we wrote. There were several things they wouldn't let us recommend or say, but I'm saying it because I see it in clinical practice. And we saw it. So problematic social media use is related to lower levels of self-esteem and life satisfaction and more loneliness and depression because this becomes the friend. I have several people that I've worked with that said they don't have any friends, they just have online friends. I didn't know that was a thing until about the last 5 to 8 years. Specific category of online friends. People with problematic social media use have higher rates of anxiety and depression. And sadly, now most physicians are recommending that children at age 8 begin being free from anxiety. That just breaks my heart.
And one of the pathways that's been identified is so people talk a lot about doom scrolling, right? So where you focus on the bad stuff. So that's where you can get the secondary trauma. But another source is when you kind of do the opposite of doom scrolling and you kind of focus on people who have these wonderful things going on in their life and they're living this wonderful, perfect life and have all these great things. And you look at your life and say, geez, I'm just not, I'm not having a good life because these people I read about on social media are doing all these things and having all these great adventures and they look beautiful and they have wonderful families. And that contributes to this kind of self-loathing. It's like, I'm not measuring up to these people. So it changes your social comparison other to more of a fantastical kind of other that's out there. And, who knows what kind of truths are out there when people post those things about how wonderful their life is. But if you're someone maybe with kind of, iffy self-esteem and you start reading about all these great things other people are doing and you look at your life and say, oh, that's a prescription for depression.
Okay, so this was kind of interesting. Teens view social media different than adults do, I think in large measure because they have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, so they don't rationalize.
That's my line.
Sorry. But here's the thing, 60% of teens figure they don't have any control over what social media companies do with their personal information, and almost half of them didn't care. Most of the teens, well, 41% of teens said that their parents they weren't concerned about their activity on social media, and 9% said they had no clue how their parents felt about social media. A lot of teens believe that their experiences on social media are better than their parents think, but a little over a quarter say they're worse. So here's a quarter of the kids on social media whose parents have no clue that they're getting cyberbullied or shamed or whatever. And then nearly half of teenage girls feel overwhelmed by all the drama they see playing out on social media. It happens, often. And then more than a third feel left out of things, that whole FOMO thing. And then 28% of them said that social media made them feel worse about their own lives.
And that's that social comparison piece I was just talking about, looking at all these wonderful, perfect people out there and then kind of looking at your own life and just realizing, geez, I suck.
So more than half of the teenagers that were surveyed said it would be really tough to give up social media. And then Sanjay Gupta does a podcast on the CNN, and it's, can't remember what it's called now. I just blanked out. But he interviewed some teenagers on an episode of his podcast. One of them was his own daughter. And his daughter said, when they were talking about banning TikTok, and she said, yeah, we're gonna change our phones and say that we live in Canada, and then we'll be able to access it. Kids have already got this figured out. They're always a step or two ahead of us.
Do you know anybody like that?
Yeah. I've been noting recently when we're at restaurants or in other places, just the other day, I was sitting in church and I saw a whole row of people were on their phones. I thought, wow, okay.
Okay, so, this is stuff, we didn't invent these ideas. This is just stuff we pulled from research we did that seem to be potential parts of a solution. Limiting access to social media for children under 18. I mean, you can almost think of the dangers of social media, honestly, being as serious as things like tobacco and alcohol, where, the government has regulated access to that. It's not maybe as obviously damaging, but, the research is piling up on bad long-term effects on children who access social media without any kind of restriction.
Can I just add something here? We were not allowed, as part of the recommendations, I had some really strong recommendations, and they kicked it back and said, no, you can't recommend banning it for kids under 18. But that's my recommendation.
Certainly parental education is important, and I would add to that parental monitoring, right? So educating them about the risks that are out there, and then, playing an active role in their child's use of social media and kind of seeing what websites they're visiting and things like that. Looking at community pressure, maybe establishing some sort of community standards for social media use. Again, parents educating their children, not just handing them their first smartphone and say, okay, have fun. Setting some boundaries around that. And this recommendation that, as an adult, and maybe model this if you have children, say, I'm gonna take, let's as a family take a 10-day social media break. This story just came out yesterday. This is from University of Texas at Austin.
Do you want me to pull it up?
Yeah. You're gonna be able to get it?
I have no, I guess not.
Okay, it was a study from the University of Texas, Austin, where they got some teenagers to voluntarily take a 2-week social media vacation. And they're relying on self-report. So, they're assuming these kids actually did this for 2 weeks, but they reported that within a 2-week period, they found noticeable improvements in mental health. Scores on scales of anxiety and depression were reduced. And they just reported in their interviews that, I feel, a lot, things just seem a little bit better now that I haven't been on social media so much for the last couple of weeks.
Okay, so what have I seen practicing here in Texarkana? I just want to make that clear that these are just things that I've seen in my clinical caseload since I've lived here. Yeah, children as young as 5 have their own phone, tablet, and/or TV in their bedroom. Parents, they used electronics, and they told me this. Yeah, we needed them as a babysitter because during COVID, we had to work from home, and we needed to occupy our kids so we can get our work done. And the kids were supposed to be doing schoolwork from home. And it just didn't work very well. So now, after COVID's done, these kids love these devices, and they're not giving them up. And the parents are, not willing to take them away. There is a greater increase in ADHD diagnoses. And parents aren't monitoring it. I'm surprised at. Part of it is because other kids know how to get around it, right? And other kids will tell your kids. Excuse me. well, here's a way to get around that. And some kids have even shown me some things, and I thought, who's thought of this? What kids thought of this? And parents don't realize the harm that is happening with these kids. Even today in class, I used to ban phones. I just said, put them away, you know, nobody, you're not that important that you need to be, you know, available 24/7. They just won't. They absolutely won't. So yeah, the parents don't realize what they're getting into. There's a higher rate of eating disorders and depression. Body image is huge for the teen girl. And there's lots of sites about how you can become anorexic. So yeah, social media has a huge impact on the body image of teenage girls. Okay, so here are some, this sweet little 11-year-old girl, bless her. She has a teeny tiny little thing, but everybody calls her fat. She thinks she's fat. She's 11. When I was 11, God, I wasn't thinking that. A girl age 10, they had a 5th grade class group meet that the teacher set up. And this girl was getting bullied on that. I just wonder, where was the teacher? Why wasn't she stopping this? The 11-year-old girl with the body shaming, about a month or two after she told me about that, she came in and showed me a picture that she had taken of herself for a dance, a 5th grade dance. And it was very form-fitting. And she was, you know, posed in a little seductive way. And I said, oh, what a pretty dress that probably, you know, a 30-year-old would wear. And she said, I wanted to show off my curves. She doesn't have any curves. Okay, so I had a 5-year-old girl that I worked with. She had a phone, a tablet, and a TV in her bedroom. She lives with her grandmother, and her grandmother allowed her to binge watch Wednesday. And I said to the grandma, whatever I do in 1 hour, you can negate in 3 when you go home. So here's the things you have to do. And the grandma wouldn't do it, so I discharged the child. It's no point. I had a 10-year-old boy that was absolutely addicted to Roblox.
Which is, I don't know what that is.
It's a kid's video game. Okay.
I'm not passing judgment.
One of the teen boys that I worked with was cyber bullied. His mom called me during the middle of the day and said, the school just called us and said that he wrote a suicide note in class on the school computer. What do I do? And he ended up in inpatient treatment for about a week. It helped some, but he still had a lot of shame that he was dealing with that just made him feel absolutely worthless. And then one of the other therapists that worked with me at Genesis Prime Care, she brought her 4-year-old daughter in and, you know, set her down with YouTube for Kids on the screen so that she could do some notes. And she picks up after a few minutes, she picks up the device and there's an ad, how to have gay sex for a 4-year-old girl. So yeah, people don't realize that, I'm sure parents don't realize the Pandora's box that have been opened because it's unregulated. Here's data, unlimited data, no gatekeeping, you know, no guardrails at all. So most of us clinicians are kind of on the same page with this. So if you insist that your child has to have a phone, get them a GAB phone. That's one that doesn't have data, but they can call and text. It's limited to a certain number. I have an 8-year-old grandson who has a GAB phone, and I'm one of the 5 people on his list that he can call and even text. And occasionally I'll get a random text from him because he's 8. He doesn't know what to do with that. If you can reduce the amount of online access that the kids have, or even that adults have, if you can wean yourself off, the psychological principle of graduate station. Unplug. I tell all my clients, you have to unplug at least 30 minutes before bedtime. Otherwise, that blue screen is still running in your head and you can't stop. It just keeps going. I'd love to see all parents place their kids' devices in another room at night. And I'd love it too if all of us did that. I mean, just out of curiosity, how many of you place your device within the arm's reach when you go to bed at night? Yeah, we've made it, we've made ourselves 24/7 accessible. And I can't tell you how many teenage clients I've had said, well, yeah, but my friend's going through a really hard time right now. What if she needs me? Okay, well, she can wait until 7 o'clock in the morning. You know, you can set some boundaries. And that's been a real problem is kids that don't know how to set boundaries. And sadly, some of their parents don't either. No TV in the bedroom. I tell my adults, your bedroom is for sleep and for sex. It isn't for TV, movies, videos, whatever. And then sleep hygiene is simply a principle that we teach to make sleep come a lot easier. What are things that you can engage in behaviors and preparation so that your brain knows it's time to go to sleep? So we have things like plugging in a lavender scent. If people just, their minds are just going, then put on a white noise machine or something like Calm that has like a nice little bedtime. It takes you off somewhere.
Just following up on that, one thing I haven't been able to find looking at the medical literature is if anyone is connected mental health issues associated with social media use to disturb sleep, right? Because that's one of the possible pathways is if you're on your screen till just before bedtime, you're not going to have a normal sleep cycle, right? And so if you have subsequent mental health problems, is that really because of what you've been seeing on social media, or is it because your sleep cycle has been interrupted and you're not getting a good night's sleep? Oh, thank you. Time for questions, comments, experiences.
It's overshare.
Yeah.
Or put it on social media, we'll read about it later.
It's different. I mean, so.
Obviously, it's all. You know,
And it will be what the DSM does in the next edition, because for the first time, they included problem gambling in the addiction diagnostic section. It's the first behavioral addiction they recognized. And looking at things like internet, whatever you want, internet addiction, smartphone addiction, social media addiction, if that's going to start becoming now a diagnostic category, because you're looking at things like insurance and counseling for those kinds of addictions. It's got to have a code for the DSM, or you're not going to get insurance. So it'll be real interesting to see. They talked about doing internet addiction. They talked about doing porn addiction and other things. So this next go round of the DSM should be very interesting in terms of how they handle it as a diagnostically real clinical situation.
Like a generational divide between older, see like the new generation,
like us.
yeah. It's just for older people that was like distinct before social media. We see that difference, and for younger people, it's like we've kind of always known it, so we don't see it as a much like it's just like we don't see social media as like separate from, it's just.
That's the difference. When it becomes who you are and the way that you behave centers around that, you can't separate it. That's when it becomes problematic.
And this whole, this is the generational thing, you know, social media influencers, right? Never heard of that until like 5 years ago. It's like, yeah, that's like what you are. I'm a social media influencer and I have all these millions of followers, so that's how cool I am. And then that's a real fairly recent phenomenon. And then I don't think we have any sort of anchor point for that. But I think you're right that growing up with it, I mean, it's like computers now. I mean, computers are still somewhat new for me. You know, I grew up without computers, but now you hand a kid a device, a 4-year-old kid a device, and it's like, in a short period of time, the human brain has evolved to know how to work computers. Like, oh yeah, I can make that happen. You know,
My 4-year-old grandson had to teach me how to access something. So yes, there is a generational divide, but you're right. You guys are hardwired with a certain ability to do those in a way that we aren't.
I'll never forget the look on my son's face, who's 17, when I told him about the world before Wi-Fi.
give him a dial-up modem for Christmas.
I was explaining it to him and he just kind of looked at me and said, the past sucked. And I was like, yeah, thanks. Golden ages. Anyhow, sorry. Other questions? Other ones? Yeah.
Coming into.
But that's like a whole other dimension of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you see people posting whatever on social media, and you know, that person didn't write that.
Most direct AI influence of what they're talking about is in the equations that determine what you see on your social media.
Yeah, that's a great point.
AI is gonna make that so much more efficient and effective.
Yeah.
Which is the very thing that makes it addictive, by the way.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You know, those things learn about you and then play to your soft spot. They know exactly what you're gonna open up, what you're gonna ignore. And the feeds get very customized individuals.
There have been times that we've been at home and we talked about something or we looked it up on Amazon or Facebook or something. And then within an hour, it comes up on Alexa.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so search for plane tickets to someplace, and then your social media feed will get advertisements for hotels and restaurants and wherever you look to fly to. It's insidious.
That's my students who took my futurism class will tell you, one of the things in 20th century futurism they didn't necessarily anticipate was that we would actually willingly carry around something that allowed us to be surveilled all the time.
Yeah.
And we were happy with it. Yeah, Kris.
But I still like access Instagram through Google, and then I like clear my search history so I'm logged out. So that's how I access it, but I can't delete my account because I have to check it for certain things or like just everything in day-to-day life, and like that's something now that you can't escape.
Well, I have taken a principled stand. When we travel, I always look up on TripAdvisor restaurants. And look for an interesting restaurant, I click on their website. If it directs me to a Facebook page, I don't go to that restaurant. I want to go to the restaurant webpage, look at their menu, don't want to go to Facebook. So I don't think it's affecting anyone's, more and more restaurants are doing that. Instead of keeping up their website, they have a Facebook page. I don't want to go on their Facebook page. I want to see their menu.
It's a part of your life. And that's fine if you're able to set it aside at times and still enjoy nature and enjoy interpersonal interactions with people, not just online. You know, if you know how to use it and use it to the benefit, then it's great. It's not.
Like I don't want to have a business and that be the main way I promote it. Like even cause I want to be a vet, and that vet clinics, it's such a crucial thing that you have to have it. And I just don't like that, so I can delete my account. Like your account will be deleted after 30 days, but I can never reach that 30 days without having. So it's just terribly frustrating.
Very much so, and that's how marketing is done. I just had a marketing meeting yesterday here on campus, and they were talking about videos and new ways to get social media things. And I'm thinking, can we just use flyers? You know, that's just how things are done. It's just, it's that dividing line, you know, how much is too much? How much is, oh my gosh, I can't have my phone, and I can't put it in another room, I'll miss out. Gotta find that sweet spot.
I'd like to piggyback on what this very insightful young lady was mentioning. One thing is when you're a communications instructor, every nail I hit with a hammer, but it's, I work for a telecommunications company, and this is not a phone. This is a handset. And it's a matter of semantics. You ask, do you put your phone nearby your bed? I do not. I put my handset near my bed because it's not a phone or a handset, it is an alarm clock. And I use it as such. But the question you were asking, generational, you had mentioned injuries from necks. I apologize for looking on my phone while you were doing this. I found a study from Harvard on neck injuries. 1991, Game Boy. Game Boy, 1993, Harvard, television usage, neck injuries. So I'm just wondering if it's the same thing as our generational look. I mean, in 1900, there were 9 posts a day of mail. You could find someone through the mail, fall in love, and end the relationship all in one day. And say it's the same. We all want that feeling of connectedness, but this one's got a little kick to it. That was very good. Thank you. I do want to have a person here, so.
I do wonder how long we'll persist in calling them phones, since we probably only spend about 3% of our time making phone calls with them, but whatever.
Don't call me.
Yeah, I know.
Text me.
What kind of person actually calls another?
Why did you leave a voicemail?
Sorry, go ahead. Any last questions before we end? And there might be some, yeah, Kris.
To piggyback on piggybacks, you know, every generation has something that is the devil, so to speak, you know, like when video games came out, oh, kids aren't going outside and they're not, you know, playing kick the can or whatever, which yes, I actually did do that. I'm still, you know, like, so it's just, when rock music came out, the generation before that was like, oh, you know, kids aren't, it's the morality of it. So is this going to just lead to more, you know, every generation's gonna have their pointed what's ruining the youth. I hope that's not gonna sound.
Yeah, because I remember when, I'm dating myself here, Led Zeppelin came out. A song that I played over and over and over, and my mom said, that's gonna ruin your ability to appreciate music. No, it doesn't. I actually. My 8-track.
Yeah, I played it, I played that. And also, how does this feed into? There's always an extremism in the world, as we all know, but like, do you think that's how extremism has gotten to the point it has?
Oh, yeah, because you can send a message and rile people up.
Because now it's not just town hall city, it's
Worldwide.
global, you know, it just feels very Orwellian, and social media is a great platform.
Yeah, you'll find extremist views on multiple sides.
Oh, yeah.
They're everywhere, but if the access now, it's just in second. That's why some of these young kids that I've treated over the years really struggle, because they could have said something on the bus on the way to school. By the time they come home and have their afternoon snack, it's all over Snapchat, it's Instagram. You know, it's just, there's no time. Everything just spreads. Like that. if I could, I would just tell parents, not till they're 16. Just don't give them a phone, give them a gab phone. But the kids are asking, they're begging, they're harassing. I had a third grader come in and say, I really want an iPhone 6 for Christmas. Why? And this is what, about probably 5 or 6 years ago. He's in high school now. I think it's just one of those things where I think a church leader I know probably put it best. When I said we have to get the kids off their phone when they come to youth activities for church. I said, can't we have them like leave it in a box or, we've got to get them off their phones. And he looked at me, he goes, but yeah, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. So we lost, we just lost the war. But I think I have hope that the young people enjoyed your lunch.
That point about the iPhone 6 is yet another dimension of the bullying is, you've only got an iPhone 4, sure, you're not cool.
Yeah.
So now it's like what device you have to look at your social media, and that's just what you're looking at.
And cool your phone case.
Right.
Can't keep up.
Well, I would say, let's say thank you one more time to Dr. Nelson. I will go ahead and upload this to our YouTube channel and thank you for subscribing and
Snapchat it too.
following our Instagram where I promoted this. But no, you're right, like you can't escape it. So for those of you who are on Instagram, feel free to follow the Honors College Instagram and for the older among us, the Facebook as well. That is not wrong. Thank you, folks.